Starting, all attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, my name is Renee Long, a communications specialist and webinar coordinator here at American College of Healthcare Sciences. Joining me today behind the scenes for all our technical needs is Dominic Aiello, a social media specialist and webinar coordinator here at ACHS. And today we'll be hosting a webinar from our Master Lecture Series. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's Master Lecture webinar, Herbs Medicinal, Magical, Marvelous, presented by ACHS graduate and herbal author DJ Martin. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. You may have noticed that your line has been muted. We are recording today's webinar, and this helps ensure we can clearly hear our presenter. You'll also notice that you have a control panel at the right-hand side of your screen. If you have a question for DJ during the webinar, go ahead and type it into the questions box, and I will read them to her so she can answer them during the 10-minute Q&A session at the end of the webinar. If you have further questions that require a bit more depth of answer, please feel free to follow up with DJ directly at dj@authordjmartin.com. She's happy to respond to all of your questions, but please be sure to give her some time to get back to you. And now I'll go ahead and turn the webinar over to DJ, who will give a brief introduction and then begin her lecture. So welcome, DJ. You should now have control of the screen.
So I do. We'll go to the slideshow here. Hi guys, as Renee said, I'm an ACHS graduate, receiving my Master Herbalist Diploma in 2008. More than that, I've been listening to plants all my life, using them not only medicinally, but in magical preparations. Several years ago, friends gave me the nickname the Herby Lady. I liked it so much I made it the name of my company, and that's also what a lot of folks on the internet know me by now. Even though I've been studying herbs for many years and have that diploma, it's going to be a lifelong journey. A well-known botanist by the name of Richard Evans Schultes documented the medicinal qualities of over 2,000 plants just in the Amazon in the mid-20th century, and experts think he got only about 1% of what's available in that jungle. My knowledge extends to a little over 300 herbs. Now you see why I feel like I'm still in training. When I was younger, I had only one definition of herb, and that one went up in smoke. Okay, I had two if you count the one that stood 6'3" and had blonde hair and blue eyes. Herbs are defined by the dictionary as a non-woody plant that produces seeds, like peppermint. Now that I'm older, my definition includes any plant or part thereof, even trees, seaweeds, ferns and mosses, and the resins that exude from trees. Many foods, like fruits and vegetables, are also in my repertoire, as they too have healing properties. One of the confusing things about herbs is the common name. If you're truly interested, I encourage you to start learning the Latin binomial names. That's a unique name given to each plant, and if you use them, you won't confuse yourself or anyone else for that matter. A while back, someone asked me about huckleberries, which were an ingredient in one of her grandmother's recipes. I'd never heard of them, but after doing some research, I found out that they're what I call blueberries, or a cousin thereof. Common names vary from region to region and country to country, and you really don't want Monarda fistulosa where you needed Melissa officinalis. Both are commonly known as balm. They do share some of the same properties, but not all, and they're not in the same botanical family. When I first started studying herbal medicine and got all befuddled by the Latin names, I made myself a cheat sheet. You can and should do the same thing yourself. Use a computer spreadsheet program and put the Latin binomial in one column and the common name you know it by in the other. That way you can sort and resort at will between the two. And if you want to be really correct, Latin binomials are always italicized, with the first or genus name capitalized and the second or species not. And although you'd think it's difficult to remember the Latin names, once you get really immersed in your studies, they tend to sometimes come more naturally than the common ones. It'll not only help you identify the correct plant, but you might be able to win someone you're playing Jeopardy! I'm sure you've seen this meme floating around the internet for the last few years. It's funny, but it's actually rather true, and I couldn't resist adding it in. So let's talk about herbal medicine first. Unless you've been living in a hole for the last 15 to 20 years, you know that there's a resurgence in herbal medicine. People everywhere are rediscovering the natural world around them, although many are simply not thrilled with all the side effects of synthetic medication. Unfortunately, most of the products on the shelves don't contain much in the way of herbs at all. Not being a chemist, I can't pronounce and haven't a clue what the vast majority of ingredients are. And if I get all tongue-tied when I'm trying to read it, I'm not really sure I want to use it. I'm always amused when herbal medicine and other practices are referred to as alternative medicine. Folks, it's original medicine. Traditional Chinese medicine is an herbal tradition that goes back more than 5,000 years. Indian Ayurvedic medicine is just about as old and is also still in use today. Both systems are very effective. If they weren't, they would have died out years ago. In the Western world, before about the 1930s, man principally relied on herbs to heal what ailed him. We won't go into the use of leeches. Most people didn't travel very far, and UPS certainly didn't deliver door to door, so one used what was growing in the yard, along the sides of fields or roads, what the local apothecary stocked, or what they could trade for. Many people had a kitchen garden and grew plants they not only tasted good, but were good for you. Then science came along and decided they could better what Mother Nature had already provided. Science has made great strides in understanding why herbs work the way they do. From the flower foxglove, they synthesized the active ingredient and made synthetic digitalis for heart problems. From the bark of the willow tree and the herb meadowsweet, they figured out what the main chemical was and made synthetic aspirin. A couple of points here. Synthesizing some herbs has saved them from extinction. That's good. Synthesizing others, like that foxglove, allows a standardized dose of what could be a dangerous plant. That's good too. But herbs are much more than their main active ingredient. All the elements found in herbs are synthesized from substances in the environment, vibrations of the air, sun, and moon, inorganic minerals from the soil, and the life-giving qualities of water. When this holistic harmony is broken or interrupted by isolating one active ingredient from the plant for its own use, it often becomes dangerous. While I'll not argue that synthesizing some plants is good, isolating one chemical destroys the harmony of the whole plant, which is where the secret of healing and health lies. For example, science, for all its research, still hasn't figured out why Rowolfia, an Indian herb, in its entirety works great and has for centuries for hypertension, yet when they make a drug from just the main active ingredient, it has some unpleasant side effects. So sometimes science is better, sometimes it's not. Most prescription drugs today have only one action. They're aimed at a specific bacterium or other problem. Herbs, unlike their synthetic counterparts, usually have more than one therapeutic property. For example, lavender is widely known as a calming herb. Did you know that it's also antiseptic and healing? It's one of the 2 or 3 essential oils you can apply directly to your skin without fear of overdosing. So, the next time you burn yourself and feel your heart racing from the pain, apply a drop or 2 of lavender oil to the burn, feel it start to get rid of the pain, and smell the aroma to calm your racing heart. I think you'll find that your burn will heal a little bit faster too. Illness is dis-ease. I've put a hyphen between dis and ease, which shows the true nature of illness. The technical term for good health is homeostasis, a word from the Greek that loosely translates as a consistent internal environment or bodily balance. Synthetic drugs only aim themselves at whatever has invaded your body, be it a bacteria or a virus or something else. They can also throw the body further out of balance. Ladies, you know what I'm talking about. If you get a prescription for an antibiotic from your doctor for a urinary tract infection, he or she will probably hand you a prescription for an antifungal at the same time. With herbs, we not only work on the invader, we try to bring the body back into balance with itself. If the body's in balance, it's more likely you'll be able to fight off the next invader to come along without outside help. First and foremost, an herbalist like me is going to promote good health. That may include not only the use of herbs, but changes in diet and lifestyle as well. Health is a slow, cumulative process that we build up and maintain with our everyday activities. It isn't simply the absence of illness or injury, but is a condition of physical, spiritual, and social well-being. I recognize that diet and lifestyle modifications aren't always easy, but sometimes that's all it takes to restore health. Unless your problem is a very serious one, you can use herbs on your own. Start small, like dealing with an everyday problem like a cut on your finger or a tension headache. Even though we've been taught that someone else knows best, who knows your body better than you? Keep a diary of your experiments, what worked, what didn't work, what you took, how much, how often you took it. This way you'll develop your knowledge of herbs and build up your list of favorites. You can use herbs as a preventive measure too. As an example, garlic is one of the best all-round herbs there is. Not only does it repel vampires, but it's great for warding off colds and flu. Herbal medicine isn't as easy as taking a pill your doctor prescribes, but for the most part, it doesn't come with all the nasty side effects. It's not a miracle cure either. Herbs don't cure the illness, they fix whatever caused the illness in the first place. So, just like changing the socket instead of just the bulb to get the lamp to work again, it takes a little bit longer. And as with prescription drugs, herbs can pose some problems. For example, if you have a ragweed allergy, I'll caution you about taking feverfew or calendula to help an issue. All 3 plants are in the same family, and if you're allergic to one, you may be allergic to all. Along the same lines, a doctor may prescribe a drug and tell you, let's try this. If it doesn't work, call me and we'll try something else. Herbs also need to be experimented with to get something that works. Every body is unique, and what works for you may not work for me, or vice versa. Virtually everybody I know falls asleep when they take valerian. For me, it's like taking an amphetamine because of a problem I have with a specific protein in my body. One thing I'll caution you if you decide to get involved in herbal medicine is to speak with your doctor first. If he or she isn't interested in natural alternatives, get a second opinion. My opinion is that allopathic, or what we now call conventional medicine, and herbal medicine can coexist, even help each other. Be sure to tell any healthcare professional about everything you're taking, including herbs and oils, to make sure there are no interactions, and never go off prescription medication until you've spoken with a medical practitioner. Another thing that amuses me, or to be honest, dismays me, is that although science has now confirmed that the use of several herbs will help or diminish several pretty nasty diseases, the medical and legal communities still haven't caught on, and at least one of those herbs, marijuana, is still illegal in most states. For those who don't want to thwart the law and opt for chemotherapy or radiation to treat cancer, for example, we can still use herbs to keep the body as healthy as possible during those awful treatments. One of my favorite quotes comes from Paracelsus, a 16th century physician, alchemist, and all-round occultist who is credited with the founding of the study of toxicology. He said, "In all things there is a poison, and there is nothing without a poison. It depends only upon the dose whether a poison is poison or not." Unlike what I've been seeing on TV and the internet these last few years, herbs aren't necessarily totally safe. You may remember the old movie where Kirk Douglas played Vincent van Gogh and the rather ugly scene where he cut off his ear. Although he obviously had some mental difficulties, it's widely thought that Van Gogh mutilated himself while under the influence of a drink called absinthe, which is made from wormwood. Wormwood is hallucinogenic in even moderate quantities, and I understand he drank a lot of the stuff. I've never figured out what the attraction is. Absinthe is so bitter that it has to be poured over a sugar cube before you can drink it. So we see an example of an herb that can be just as bad as LSD. There are known side effects to herbs as well as drugs, and some pretty serious interactions if you combine them. Do your homework and talk with your doctor, and if you're unsure of anything herbal, please speak with a qualified naturopathic physician or herbalist. There's a lot of misinformation out there. From here, let's move on to herbal magic. I don't know about you, but I don't believe in the Harry Potter type of magic, no matter how much I wish I could wave a wand. My house is all clean, my laundry done, folded, and put away. My nose twitch seems to be on the fritz as well. So I use what's available to me to help myself along when I need it. I'm going to put a qualifier in here. For the most part, everything I have to say is my own opinion. You can form your own. Like many herbal practitioners, I have a difficult time separating the physical effect of herbs from the emotional or magical effect. Let me give you a few examples. As far back as the Middle Ages, there were physic gardens at monasteries, and people relied on the monks for healing. Prayer, no matter what form it takes, is a powerful form of magic. The monks used their prayer in addition to herbs to heal their patients. As with anything, most of the time it worked, sometimes it didn't. And even before Christianity took hold, there were the Druids and tribal medicine men and women that used herbs and rituals to heal their sick and injured. The Cherokee believed that when the world was still young, the animals got pretty tired of being treated more or less like dirt by the humans. They called a council and started concocting diseases and other hurts for the humans to get back at them. The Great Spirit, who believes in balance in all things, asked the plants to make their healing properties known to the humans to counteract what the animals were coming up with, and the plants agreed. That's how plant medicine came into being. By the way, the Cherokee don't define plant medicine the same way as white folks do. The medicine man may prescribe a tea or an amulet to carry with you for an upset stomach. It's all the same. That's why a medicine man not only had to know how to help physical ailments, but he's usually a tribe's spiritual advisor as well. Are you old enough to remember back in the 1960s when talking to your plants was the latest craze? Believe it or not, it's based on scientific research. The book, The Secret Life of Plants, details research conducted by a well-known lie detector expert starting in 1966. One experiment I found extremely interesting was they put 6 people in a room with 2 plants. After the researcher had left the room, all but one person also left, and that remaining person murdered one of the 2 plants and then left himself. The expert then came back in and hooked up a polygraph to the remaining plant and called each person into the room individually. There was no response on the polygraph to the 5 innocents, but the pen flew across the paper when the murderer came into the room. Many of us were talking to our plants long before that book came out, but many more now do it with jungle-like results. So, if you talk to a plant and it responds, doesn't that imply there's a spirit there? Must be a good one. Plants have been helping man since time immemorial, and we need all the help we can get. It's interesting to note that many of the incense ingredients used throughout history, like myrrh, frankincense, cinnamon, cloves, and others, are also healing agents. Not that I've done any research into the subject, but I believe the use of healing agents in incense mixtures started back when people may not have known about the virus that was causing them to get sick, but they did know that more folks got sick when they congregated together, and some of these herbs helped those people. Smoke is a good way of getting the healing properties of the herbs into folks in mass quantities. Something that smells as good as incense makes you instinctively inhale deeper, drawing the good smoke deeper into your lungs. And just as an aside, a study done in India in 2007 proved that smudging a room eliminated 94% of airborne bacteria in 60 minutes. Because the study room was closed, the air was still mostly clean 24 hours later. Today's Orthodox churches still use incense in their masses, even when those self-same churches work only on spiritual health. It's a part of the ritual that's been passed down through the centuries when the original reason for it is no longer valid and quite probably forgotten. We witches know that money spells don't generate massive amounts of cash. If they did, we'd all be millionaires and I'd be talking to you from my beachside mansion in Hawaii. When money's tight, though, I seem to get something that helps ease the strain, whether it's a less than expected bill, a new client, or a previously unthought of way to generate some cash. Magic works like herbal medicine, too. It doesn't work immediately, but takes time to reshape that energy around you to achieve a goal. Why do we use herbs in magic? That answer is lost in time. Paul Barrel, a master herbalist and magician, has an interesting working theory. We know that trace chemicals found in herbs have an effect on the brain. Using an herb of love as an example, he theorizes that using an herb in a magical sense may help stimulate a subtle change in the brain, which allows one to open up to a possibility which was previously denied. I know them to be allies. When I ask nicely, they lend their individual energies to whatever I'm working on. My other theory is that they keep working even after I've completed my spell or ritual, so in that way they're sort of like my surrogates. Like herbal medicine, herbal magic is individualized. You need to experiment to see what works for you, and again, keep a diary. The first and cardinal rule in plant medicine, both in the Hippocratic Oath and in the Wiccan Rede, is do no harm. Not to yourself, not to anybody else. That means studying the herb and the application you're interested in and ensuring it's safe. Just like in herbal medicine, many herbs have more than one energy. For example, peppermint can be used to promote healing, attract love, and in purification spells. Let me speak a moment about the storage of your herbs. Fresh herbs that you get from your garden or the grocery store should be kept in the vegetable bin in your refrigerator with a setting for that bin on low humidity. Dried herbs should be kept in a cool, dark, dry place, something the grocery store and even your local health food store don't do. All those little bottles are clear, letting in light that leaches the good stuff out of the herb quickly. In school, we were taught that you could put your herbs in a canning jar, which is clear, then put that jar into a brown paper bag closed with a twist tie and labeled. Honestly, most of us don't have enough shelf space to store them that way. And most of us want them in a kitchen cupboard so they're handy for cooking. That cute little spice rack sitting on the counter is just as bad as the shelves at the store. The cupboard next to the stove is dark, but it's also warm, and the water you boil your pasta in adds humidity to the air. I keep a small supply in the cupboard next to the stove, what I'm going to use up in maybe a month or two. The rest of my supply is in Ziploc bags with all the air squished out, clearly marked, of course, with what it is and when I harvested or purchased it. Those bags are in an opaque plastic tub in my basement, which is dark, cool, and dry. I replenish my kitchen stock from there as needed. If you don't have a plastic tub, a cardboard box will suffice. And if you don't have a basement, the back of a cool, dark closet works. Alternatively, if you do have a lot of shelf space for those canning jars, paint your jars with glass paint, putting on several coats. That'll at least keep the light out. Check your stock every few months. If it doesn't smell like it should, especially if it smells slightly musty, it's time to discard them and get new stock. But if stored properly, dried herbs will last a year or more. The other thing I want to advocate is recycling your herbs back to the earth. Once you've used them in your tea or tincture or bath, please compost them. If you live in an apartment or somewhere that compost piles or bins aren't allowed, ask if you can bury them in a flower garden, or you can mix them in the dirt in your flower pots. Both medicinally and magically, there are a bunch of ways to use herbs. So let's talk about a few preparations. Believe it or not, the easiest way to use herbs is in food. I mean, you have to eat, so why not? You can cook a very healthful meal using fruits and vegetables and adding in some herbs. Or you can make your meal a truly magical one by reciting your ritual as you're cooking. The most common method of use is called a tea, although tea is the common name for the herb Camellia sinensis. Magically, it's usually called a brew, potion, or filter. If you have a leafy type herb or a flower, you can make what's called an infusion by steeping 1 teaspoon dried herb in 1 cup just boiled water for about 10 minutes. Your water should still be steaming, but not bubbling. One of the mistakes I see frequently is folks putting a bag in a cup of hot water and walking around with it until they think it's steeped enough. Letting the steam escape is also letting a lot of the good compounds escape. So cover it. If you have one of those fancy mugs with a cover, cool. Otherwise, I just place a saucer over the top of my cup. If you want a tea of a root or a bark, you need to make what's known as a decoction to extract the goodness. Put 1 teaspoon herb in 1½ cups cold water and bring it to a boil. Reduce the heat and simmer until the liquid is reduced down to a cup. Strain and then drink. Be aware that for the most part, a dried herb is twice as strong as fresh, so if you're using fresh herbs, double the amount you're using in any recipe. And a side note, before you put your herbs in the water, crunch it up a bit. For a leafy herb or a flower, crunch it in your hand or use the flat of a spoon. For a root or a bark, smash it a little bit with a hammer or something. The pores of the herbs close in the drying process, and you want to open them back up to allow the water to get in. And if you're making a cup of tea with a commercial tea bag, crunch that up too. I think you'll find your tea more flavorful. And another quick note. These directions are generalities. While they'll serve you well with most herbs, there are exceptions to every rule. For example, red clover flowers do best as a decoction. You'll need to check dosages on the individual herbs, but as a general rule, 1 cup 3 times a day is a good medicinal dosage. And don't gulp it. Take it in sips to allow the medicine to slowly make its way into your system. And depending on the herb, sips are better anyways, because if you gulp it all down at once, your stomach might rebel. Only make a day's worth of tea at one time and store anything unused in the fridge until you're ready to drink it, because teas don't last very long. Magically, teas make wonderful washes, whether for yourself or perhaps ritual items. You can also drink the tea as a part of a spell, assuming it's safe to ingest. Teas are also used to make fomentations. These are for external treatments if you've never heard of them, and I know a lot of people confuse them with poultices. A fomentation is made by making a strong tea, double the amount of herb you're using, and then once it's steeped enough, strain it and soak a cloth in the tea and apply the cloth to the part of the body that you want to affect. You know that editorial insert sign, the carrot? Well, here's a verbal one. The 3 cups a day is for an otherwise healthy adult. Dosages for children, the elderly, and frail people are much more critical. Another general rule you can see here. But I wouldn't use herbs for a baby internally until they're at least a year old, and then only under the guidance of a doctor, herbalist, or naturopath. Just too many things can easily go wrong with infants. Pure essential oils are another great way to enjoy the goodness of herbs. They're also known as volatile oils or ethereal oils. Essential oils are where all the good smell is. And here I'm going to stress the word pure. I've seen stuff on the shelves that claims to be pure, yet the price tells me it can't be. The less essential oil in a plant means more of the plant is required to produce the oil. For example, it takes 60,000 rose blossoms to produce 1 ounce of rose essential oil, the second most expensive oil there is. Conversely, there's a lot more oil in a lavender plant, and 220 pounds of lavender flowers will produce 7 pounds of oil. Jasmine, one of my favorites, requires 8 million hand-picked blossoms to produce just 2.2 pounds of oil. Since you're looking for the essence of the plant, you want to be sure of the purity of your oil no matter what you use it for, unless you're just looking to make your house smell nice. In a medicinal context, the use of essential oils is pretty much limited to application on the skin. Please do not use them internally unless you're under the guidance of a certified aromatherapist, because they are strong. Lavender and tea tree are the only 2 oils you can apply directly to your skin without fear of overdosing, and in some cases people are sensitive to tea tree, so that also has to be diluted. An adult can use clove oil directly on a toothache, but that should only be a drop or 2 on a piece of cotton. Everything else, please dilute no more than 10 drops in an 1/8 cup of carrier oil like olive or coconut or jojoba, to name a few. Or you can put a few drops of oil in your bath. You can also inhale the essential oils by putting a few drops in an oil warmer or humidifier. Magically, essential oils can be used the same way as you would medicinally, but you can also put a few drops on a handkerchief to carry with you, or use them to anoint ritual candles or other items. Again, if you're going to come into skin contact, please dilute. A lot lot of people also use tinctures or simples. Merriam-Webster defines a tincture as the solution of a medicinal substance in an alcoholic or hydroalcoholic menstruum. In plain English, steep drugs, or in our case, herbs, which are drugs, in either alcohol or a combination of alcohol and water. Anyways, a simple is a tincture of a single herb. Scientifically, we know that some chemicals extract better in water and others in alcohol, so if you want to get real technical, you need a chart to tell you what proportions to use. However, you can make a good one at home by using either vodka or brandy. These have a decent water to alcohol ratio that will extract most of the beneficial chemicals. And if you're going to do this, don't buy the really cheap stuff on the shelf at the liquor store. Get a good quality bottle of booze for your medicinal use. As the old saying goes, you get what you pay for, and even though some people can't tell the difference in taste, the cheap stuff may not be real pure, and some of the adulterations wouldn't be very helpful in a medicinal context. The ratio you want to use is 1 to 10. That means 1 ounce by weight of dried herb to 10 ounces by volume of booze. Put all this in a jar and keep that jar in a cool, dark place for about 10 days, shaking it once a day. Now, you'll notice that a lot of herbs will absorb all or nearly all of the liquid. Just add more until the liquid level is about 1/4 of an inch above the herb. It's okay. After the 10 days are up, strain. I use flour sacking dish towels as the first strain. The weave is thicker than cheesecloth, but not quite as bad as a t-shirt. Squeeze hard, too, to get all the liquid you can out of the herbs. Now, strain again. This time, use a coffee filter that you've dampened a little bit to prevent your tincture from wicking up too fast. This strain is going to take a little bit because you want to get all the dregs out, and they kind of clog up at the bottom. I put the coffee filter in a strainer and balance that over a glass cup or bowl. That way I can walk away from it and do something else because I like to multitask. Bottle your tincture, being sure the bottle has been sterilized. I like amber or cobalt bottles to keep the light out, but this is for just about anything. In this case, the alcohol acts as a preserving agent, and your tincture will last 2 to 4 years depending upon the storage conditions. If you're averse to the use of alcohol in any form, you can use the same method with vinegar or glycerin. Just be aware that your preparation isn't going to be medicinally as potent. And if you use vinegar, be sure to use a jar without a metal lid or put a piece of plastic wrap over the mouth of the jar before screwing the lid on, because vinegar fumes eat metal. If you want to take several different herbs at a time, tincture them individually to ensure that you have a good product, then combine your tinctures. This is known as a compound. Now, to use this concoction. Again, check your dosages, but the rule of thumb is 15 to 30 drops in at least a half a glass of water 2 to 3 times a day for internal use. Start with the lower dosage first, and if you don't see an improvement in a few days, then slowly increase the number of drops. You can also use tinctures externally like a liniment or a rub. Just dilute a little bit before use because alcohol can be irritating to skin. Magically use them the same way as you would for health workings or to charge paper for written work. Here, soak the paper in the tincture and then allow it to dry completely before writing on it. Ointments are another way to use herbs. Traditionally, an ointment was made with lard that had herbs steeped in it, but today we have vegetable vegetable shortening, and it smells so much better. Or you can use any vegetable oil or anhydrous lanolin, which is available through your health food store, and then add a little bit of beeswax to thicken it. Another caution here, if you're allergic to wool, don't use lanolin. Lanolin is the oil collected from sheep, just like the oil off of your skin. If you're using shortening, melt about a cup over low heat. Add about 3 tablespoons of dried herbs and allow it to simmer for about 10 minutes or so. Don't let the heat get so high the shortening smokes. Strain and put into a sterilized jar. Medicinally, you can use them for skin preparations and magically massage an ointment into your pulse points during a ritual. Once you start getting seriously involved in the use of herbs, your favorite list is going to grow and grow and grow. Although I try to keep my supply down to those that will do at least double duty for medicinal and magical uses, I think there's something like 30 herbs in my shop at the moment. No, I don't grow all of them. I love myrrh, but I haven't figured out how to keep a tree alive here in my forest when it's a native of the deserts of Yemen. And the problem you run into with having a ton of different herbs around is, especially with magical uses, you only need a pinch of something. Even with proper storage, the rest is eventually going to go bad. Thankfully, there are a boatload of herbs that have the same effect, so you can just substitute. A friend of mine used to have an online forum called Witchy Living, and one of the threads was a poll of the best herbs to have when you're first starting out. I counted 42 recommendations, which is a little much. Figure out what you love, what you use the most of, especially in cooking, and then start with maybe 10 or 13 if you want to get magical about it. Due to time constraints, I'll touch on 5 you probably already have, and I'll go alphabetically by the common name I know them by, so I'm not accused of playing favorites. First up is basil, or sweet basil. I think everyone knows this is a great cooking herb. I'm a huge fan of Italian food and use it along with oregano on a lot of stuff. It also features prominently in Thai and Vietnamese cuisine. However, cooking isn't what we're here to talk about, and thank goodness because I'm not much of a chef. Basil originates in the tropical regions of India, so it likes to be warm and moist. In most parts of the United States, it does best either indoors in a pot or as an annual in a sunny garden. I don't grow it, but I understand it can be temperamental, growing well for some and dying almost immediately for others. If you use it a lot in cooking, you'll notice that when it's dried, it's not as fragrant as when fresh. That's because some of the volatile oils evaporate. So it really depends upon how strong you want your flavoring to be. If you can't keep a plant, but instead buy it fresh from the produce section of your grocery, try freezing the leaves individually by placing them on a cookie sheet and putting that into the freezer for a couple of hours. Store them in a freezer bag and you'll have that stronger taste for several months. The historical accounts of basil's use are interesting. In both Greece and Rome, basil was associated with hatred, and it was believed that the plant would not grow well unless it was abused. In other words, it should be planted with plenty of swearing or it wouldn't grow. Maybe this is the problem why it won't grow for some people. An old superstition from the botanist John Parkinson says that if you bruise basil, it will breed scorpions, or that smelling the plant would bring a scorpion into the brain. Conversely, the botanist John Gerard said that anyone stung by a scorpion should eat basil. They'd feel no pain. As a matter of fact, the scorpion business is perhaps one clue to its common name. Someone somehow linked a scorpion to a basilisk, which has basil as a component of its spelling. In India, the plant is sacred and is cherished in every Hindu household. Every good Hindu goes to his eternal rest with a basil leaf on his breast. This is his passport to paradise. A lot of people keep a basil plant in the kitchen, and if you do, you know how good it smells. For this reason, it makes a great natural perfume to attract love. As a matter of fact, it had the reputation of an erotic herb, and for this reason, the ancient Romans gave it to their horses and donkeys in rut. But let's just stick with the emotion. Historical accounts can't make up their mind whether it's an herb to attract or repel love. I'm sticking with attraction because if you plant it outside, it'll attract bees and butterflies. It's also used to attract money. Some people carry a leaf in their pocket, some put it in their cash register. I anointed my first dollar bill with a wee bit of the essential oil and tucked that bill into the file folder with all the legal paperwork I filed to start my first company. More than 20 years later, I'm still in business, so something worked right. A friend of mine makes a basil tea with fresh leaves, not dried, and sprinkles it on her doorstep each month to bring prosperity to the house. She says it's great for people working from home. A small basil plant given as a housewarming gift will bring good luck to the new home. This is an especially good gift if the new homeowner likes to cook. It's also said to repel flies. Put a pot of it on your windowsill or outside your door to keep these pests away. You can still find pots of basil on the outdoor tables of French restaurants for this purpose. You'll notice that 2 of the magical applications are exorcism and protection. Think on this a bit, and you can come up with basil as a really good herb to use in purification rituals. I've heard also that it's used in initiation rites. From the purification and protection, we have an easy transition to the therapeutic actions. Basil is antibacterial, so it makes a nice wash for problems like acne, or to wash a cut or a scrape before treating it further. It's also used as a tea to cool fevers and makes an excellent poultice for skin irritations. Simply crush a fresh leaf or 2 and apply them to your rash. One thing that's rarely thought of is that basil is a vermifuge. This means it helps the body expel worms. Scary thought though it may be, intestinal worms are quite prevalent here in the United States. We get them through tainted food and little kids eating dirt. Although there are other herbs that are better at killing and expelling parasites, basil will do well if you have nothing else around. Apart from its use in cooking, basil does best as an infusion for medicinal purposes. The essential oil can be used in magical applications. Hello. Thank you. Garlic. The Mediterranean folks have it right. There are a few Italian dishes that don't even have a taste of it. Virtually everything is heavy on the garlic. Many people, me included, get gastric upset with fresh garlic. If this is the case and you want to try eating it again, try roasting it. While this will remove some of the healthful compounds, it won't remove all of them, and it probably won't upset your stomach. Or, for medicinal purposes, take garlic capsules, but not pills. The oil in the capsules has had the stomach-irritating compound removed. The pills remove all sorts of other good things or add unneeded stuff. The history of garlic use is so old, no one can truly trace its origins, although some speculate it came from Siberia and then traveled the world. It seems to grow virtually everywhere. We know it goes back to the ancient Egyptians at least. Both onion and garlic were invoked as deities on the taking of oaths. And the ancient Greeks left it on piles of stones at a crossroads as a supper for Hecate, although Cabell must not have liked this herb. Garlic eaters were forbidden from entering her temples. Even if you don't like it or it doesn't like you, you've had to have heard about its wonderful medicinal properties over the last several years. I recommend everyone either eat a couple of cloves a day or take a garlic supplement. It has so many healthful benefits. My list of therapeutic actions is 27 strong. Its boost to the immune system alone is worth the price of admission. Although the list of medicinal uses you see here is really short, infection covers a lot of problems. The immune system boost may be a reason why early English farmers fed their fighting cocks on garlic. According to a book from the mid-1500s, it made them most stout to fight. And we've known for quite some time that garlic is antiseptic. It was bought by the ton by the British government in World War I for use in field surgeries. The juice was expressed from the fresh clove, diluted a little bit with water, and then applied to wounds with sterilized sphagnum moss to prevent infection. Garlic is the primary ingredient in four thieves vinegar. This has a long storied magical use, but the vinegar was used successfully during an outbreak of the plague in Marseille in 1722. One of my favorite things to do is try and figure out why an herb is used for a particular magical application. Okay, we'll never know who came up with it all, but quite often I can extrapolate a magical use from a medicinal one, or maybe it's the other way around. So, going back to the antibacterial and anti-a-lot of other things properties, garlic is used to magically purify cooking pots to remove negative energies. Simply rub a clove around the inside of the pot before using it, but be sure to rinse it if you're not planning on cooking garlic-flavored food in that pot. Both garlic and onion, which is a close relative, are said to remove illness. A cut onion was kept in the kitchen in medieval times to prevent illness from originating in that room. Even today, cooks hang garlic in bunches from the kitchen ceiling or keep baskets of onions nearby. They say it's to keep those frequently used herbs at hand, but I'll bet you the habit stems from those medieval times. Again, going back to those anti-almost everything medicinal properties, rub a cut clove of garlic on an infected part of the body and then throw it away in running water to get rid of disease. And if you want to repel negative or envious people, not just vampires, hang a bunch of garlic over your doorway. Since thieves are notoriously negative folks, this will help prevent theft too. Garlic grows easily just about anywhere. Even though there are a lot of varietals on the market, if you want just regular old garlic, buy a few bulbs at your grocery store. Plant it almost anywhere. Buy your rose bushes or tomatoes is good. This is called companion planting. Put it in a sunny spot in early spring, but it doesn't have to be after the last frost. You can even plant them as early as February as long as you're able to loosen the soil. Divide each bulb into its individual cloves and then plant these pointy side up about 6 inches apart. They'll grow nicely without much attention and should be ready for harvesting around August or September, depending upon your climate because it doesn't like wet summers. Save a couple of your bulbs in a cool spot over the winter and then replant your cloves next year for the next crop. Lavender. Apart from rose, probably the most loved flower in the world. My grandmother used to sprinkle lavender water on her sheets prior to ironing them, back when people actually ironed sheets. I'm not sure how my grandfather felt about sleeping on lavender-scented sheets, but the ones on the guest bed sure smelled good. It kept moths and bugs out of her linens, too. It gets its name from the Latin verb lavare, to wash, or perhaps livendulo, which means livid or bluish. I'm going with lavare, otherwise we probably call it lavender. It was used extensively by those Latin speakers, especially by Roman soldiers who used it to clean and dress war wounds. It's first mentioned in writing by Dioscorides in 77 CE, and he was a Greek military physician. The use of lavender can be traced back to ancient Egypt, where it was used by the royals and priests in their cosmetics, massage oils, and medicine. Rumor has it that solid cones of lavender, probably infused beeswax, were placed on the heads of the wealthy, and as the cones melted down their body, they were covered in perfume. Sticky, but they smelled good. While most of the time one species of a plant won't have exactly the same medicinal actions as another, here we have a couple of different species you can use interchangeably. Lavandula angustifolia, which is generally thought of as English lavender, and Lavandula officinalis, or French lavender. Whichever one you get will work the same way. And a side note, Englishwoman Maud Grieve, in her 1931 A Modern Herbal, used the Latin binomial Lavandula vera, or true lavender, to describe English lavender. For once, it wasn't the French who thought their stuff was the best. But watch what you're buying. Some things contain lavandin, which, while a lavender, has a slightly camphorous smell to it. Most people know that lavender is a calming scent and therefore good for anxiety attacks. Its lovely smell is uplifting to many, so it's an antidepressant. You can drink a cup of lavender tea or rub a couple of drops of straight lavender oil on your temples or the nape of your neck to help with a tension headache. It'll relax the muscles that are tight, causing that headache. Queen Elizabeth I was known for drinking lavender tea to help with her migraines. And let me warn you that the lavender tea doesn't taste like the flower smell, nor is it that gorgeous blue-purple of the flowers. It tastes somewhat bitter, and it's a light green in color. If you associate the word calm with lavender, it'll help you remember its uses. And I'm not talking about anxiety or insomnia or headaches. How about calming menstrual cramps or calming the discomfort of indigestion? I mentioned earlier about putting a drop or two of lavender oil on a burn to calm the pain in your racing heart and to help the burn heal faster. These medicinal properties of the oil were first discovered by an early 20th century French chemist in a perfumery. When he burned his hand badly in a laboratory explosion, he plunged his hand into the closest liquid possible, which just happened to be a vat of lavender essential oil that had just been distilled. He discovered it calmed the pain right down, and he had little to no scar tissue form. The oil isn't just good for burns. It can be applied for any skin hurt, like insect stings, rashes, cold sores, canker sores, to name a few. As well as quite a few medicinal properties, lavender has a long list of magical properties. Scott Cunningham said that the scent of lavender attracts men. He obviously wasn't hanging out with my husband, who doesn't care for lavender at all, but can be called from just about anywhere with its scent of patchouli. Cunningham may have gotten the idea from a few old customs. During the reign of Henry VIII, a girl would sip lavender tea on St. Luke's Day, which is October 18th, and murmur a plea to the saint to show her her true love in her dreams. Or Alpine girls would use lavender to ensure marital passion from their husbands. They got this idea from the Roman women that would do the same thing. Because of its calming properties, it makes sense that it would be great for spells for peace and harmony, sleep, stress management, anger management, anywhere a calming influence is needed. I'd also add it to healing mixtures, since people tend to get a bit anxious when they're sick or injured. While everyone always thinks of the flower or oil when thinking about lavender, if you grow your own, you can harvest and dry the stalks and leaves, and then use those in your incense mixtures. Unlike the flowers, the stalks and leaves have a strong deodorizing smell. Lavender is, at least for me, a rather picky plant, although I know a lot of people that have really good luck with it. I've been trying to ring my garden with it for years because it's one of the few plants the deers and other critters don't like. So far, I think I've got 6 plants surviving. Anyways, it likes really well-drained soil in a sunny location. It's very susceptible to fungus and root rot, so whatever you do, don't mulch it with dead leaves or anything else designed to hold in moisture. Peppermint. This is another herb with a list of therapeutic actions a mile long. Based on my talking with folks, most people grow it in their garden, and they all know just how well it will spread and take over a given area. When I was too lazy to start it from seed, which is hard anyways, and bought some plants at the local nursery, the lady there informed me that a lot of city people like peppermint lawns. That wasn't what I was looking at, but hey, no mowing, and it sure smells good. And before we go any further into this herb, believe it or not, mint is one of those herbs that can be harmful. Science has discovered that drinking mint tea, either peppermint or spearmint, can lessen sperm count. Therefore, it's not something that should be drunk by a man who's a part of a couple trying to conceive. Like a lot of herbs, it's a native of the Mediterranean, but it's so hardy it'll grow just about anywhere. And like most all mints, you can neglect it and it'll still be happy. One thing I want to mention here, if you're growing more than one species of mint, be sure to plant them far apart. If you don't, they'll cross-pollinate and you'll end up with a bunch of plants that aren't anything like what you started out with. Because the use of the word mint is more prevalent than the individual species, it's pretty difficult to tell in historical documents exactly which mint people are talking about. Some research I've read suggests that peppermint, unlike its cousin spearmint, isn't a natural species but is an ancient hybrid of spearmint and watermint. Its Latin binomial, mentha x piperita, reflects this hybridization in the X. Now you know another Latin binomial trick. If the name contains an X, it's a cross or a hybrid. The cultivation and use of mint in a medicinal and probably magical sense is documented back to the ancient Egyptians, Chinese, Japanese, Greeks, and Romans. The Romans are the ones that introduced it into the British Isles. They didn't want to live without it. It's said that the Romans used mint to clean boards before using them to serve meat to their guests. Little did they know then that all mints are highly antibacterial and probably kept some folks from getting sick from putrefying meat juices that would seep into the wooden serving boards. It was also used extensively by both the Greeks and Romans as a scenting herb. It was added to baths, and the Greeks, who were famous for perfuming themselves with different scents for different parts of the body, reserved mint for their arms. They also used it in bridal bouquets and wreaths. Mint was also one of the precious herbs taken from England to Massachusetts by the Pilgrims. For those who experience tension headaches and don't care for the smell of lavender, a few drops of peppermint oil diluted in a base oil can substitute for rubbing lavender oils on your temples or the base of your neck. You can also use the same highly diluted oil and rub a few drops on the gums of a teething baby or where you have a toothache. It'll numb the pain. Peppermint is also used extensively for stomach maladies. It's probably not in vogue anymore because of all the pills that are out on the market, but when I was a kid, people who experienced indigestion on a regular basis used to put a drop or two of peppermint essential oil onto a sugar cube and then suck on that after a meal. This is the progenitor of our after-dinner mint, which today may or may not contain impure oil. And it's an natural breath freshener too, huh? Again, because it's anti a lot of things, peppermint is great for purification purposes. Along the same lines, use it in health and healing spells. I read somewhere you should rub the fresh leaves or essential oil on a furniture and floorboards to cleanse an area of negativity. I'll tell you, I'm not a fan of spiders in the house, and if I see one, it causes all sorts of negativity. So I modified an old folk remedy for keeping spiders away. Instead of putting sprigs of fresh peppermint under my furniture, which the cats would eat and immediately throw up, I put some peppermint oil into a bottle of distilled water and spritz that on all the windowsills, baseboards, and then for good measure, my bed skirt. It works great. And as an aside, lemon will do the same thing. If you don't have any lemon oil at home, or if you're too lazy to make something up, cheat and use commercial lemon furniture polish. Peppermint is also used to enhance psychic powers, and it's specific for dream magic. I wouldn't recommend drinking a cup of peppermint tea before bed if you're working on your dreams. It can be a stimulant to some people, and it just might keep you up. Instead, put a sprig underneath your pillow or add it to your dream pillow. We come to my favorite herb, rosemary. Many herbalists have special relationships with some plants, and rosemary is the primary one of those for me. There's something about its scent that draws me like no other. It's resiny like pine, yet not. Rosemary is another plant native to the Mediterranean. It likes to be warm and a little dry, and it'll take all the sunlight it can get. Where I live in the mountains of North Georgia, I have my plants on a hillside so the water doesn't collect near their bases. It also gets cold here, so in the wintertime they get their own little greenhouse with stakes and plastic. They seem to like where they are because mine are not small plants by any stretch of the imagination. There are a few old English sayings related to rosemary that tickle me. They're all along the lines of, where rosemary grows, the woman rules the house. It's said that men would secretly damage a flourishing rosemary plant because of this. I'm so glad my husband doesn't think that way. From ancient times, rosemary has had a reputation of strengthening the memory, and as such became an emblem of fidelity for lovers. Perhaps this is why Shakespeare's Ophelia said, "There's rosemary, that's for remembrance." We're also told that Anne of Cleves wore a wreath of rosemary at her wedding to Henry VIII. Branches of rosemary, gilded and tied with pretty ribbons, were also gifted to wedding guests as a symbol of love and loyalty. I understand it's still used at Welsh funerals as a sign of friendship to the deceased. This custom also dates from antiquity. From ancient Egypt to ancient Rome, rosemary was considered a plant of death. Sprigs were placed on the dead body not only to confer immortality, but it was also thought the aroma would preserve the corpse. Rosemary makes great incense. As a matter of fact, an old French name for rosemary is essentier, or to give it the American pronunciation, incensier. This comes from antiquity as well. If you recall the Bible, the gifts to the baby Jesus were not only gold, but frankincense and myrrh. This is because those two resins were even more expensive than gold. So we can see that the incense was too expensive for your average Joe, and rosemary was burned in its stead. One of the uses I put it to is in place of white sage when purifying an area. I don't care for the smell of white sage, and rosemary does the job quite well. It works to purify not just magically, but medicinally. As a matter of fact, rosemary was burned in sick wards in French hospitals to purify the air as late as World War I. Rosemary has a lot of uses. Because it's antispasmodic, it's used frequently in massage oils. A medicinal remedy from the 13th century is to steep a handful of fresh rosemary in a quart of vodka for a week. This is called hungry water. It was used as a facial wash to guarantee good color and supple skin, as well as a liniment for problems caused by poor blood circulation. And for those women of a certain age, it's said that inhaling the fumes of Hungary water will combat the vapors. A tincture made with white wine instead of vodka is also useful. Taken in small quantities, it can get rid of a tension headache, and I've heard some migraine sufferers use this to good effect as well. A mouthwash of rosemary, while not typically minty, does freshen the breath and disinfect. Once upon a time, toothpicks were made of rosemary wood for this reason. A note of caution here, rosemary shouldn't be used in medicinal dosages during pregnancy. Although it's generally considered safe and no official source has any contraindications, it can have uterine stimulant properties on some women. The little you might use to cook your rack of lamb is okay, but nothing more than that. It hasn't been studied enough to determine if external use is okay or not, so I'd probably avoid it. There are plenty of other herbs that are safe if you need to address an issue. As I said before, rosemary is great for magical purification and protection. You can burn it as incense or make a tea to wash your hands and tools prior to doing any healing work. I've also read that if you hang a branch over your front door, it will deter thieves. Because it has a reputation as a memory or mental powers enhancer, ancient Greek students used to weave rosemary into their hair to help with memory and luck during exams. I put rosemary essential oil in candles and I burn them at my desk. It helps me concentrate. Works too. It got me through the physiology and anatomy part of my Master Herbalist course, and I really dislike science. Here endeth my droning. I want to share some links with you, both the link to the herb courses here at ACHS, which of course I highly recommend, and their apothecary shop where you can get all sorts of useful stuff. In addition, here's a link to my website in case you want to know more about me. Thanks so much for listening. Renee, do we have any questions?
We do. There's a few questions, but everybody, just so you know, if you have any questions for DJ, you can go ahead and type them into the chat box, and I will read them out loud to DJ so everyone can hear the questions. So our first question is from Britt Lynn, and she would like to know why, when putting herbs into a decoction stronger than letting it sit in hot water tea for the same amount of time? Or I think she's asking, why is it that when you put herbs into a decoction, is it stronger than putting them?
I've never found my decoctions to be any stronger than an infusion.
Okay. Britlin, I hope that answers your question. I don't know if you want to clarify a little bit. I'm not sure if I'm reading your question correctly. So if you have any clarifying notes, just go ahead and send them through. Anybody else with questions? It's your time right now. Okay, looks like we have some questions now.
Okay.
So this comes from Ariane, and she would like to know, if you made a huge batch of Cleaver's tincture and never took the herb out of the alcohol, do you think it is still good to use after 1 month?
After a month, sure. I actually do allow my tinctures to macerate for about a month's time because I go by lunar calendar. I do mine for an entire lunar cycle. So yeah, after a month, fine. But you do actually have to take the herb out at some point, otherwise it is going to go bad.
Oh, okay, good to know. Ariel would like to know, are there any magical uses for Gerber daisies?
I don't know. If you send me an email and remind me, I'll be happy to look, but that's not one that I've actually used myself.
Great, and Ariel, DJ's email is, sorry, I had it right here in front of me. It's dj@authordjmartin.com if you want to follow up with her. And the next question comes from Samantha, and she says, what material would you suggest to use for a poultice?
Honestly, you can use a towel. Those flour sacking dish towels that I use to strain my tinctures or any preparation with actually work very great too because they're very absorbent. But you can use any kind of cotton, even a bath towel will work.
Great. Our next question comes from Susan, and she would like to know, I have a question regarding peppermint, as I've heard peppermint oil isn't safe for children. Is this true?
Straight, it's not safe for anybody. For children, I would highly dilute it. I know that the usual is 10 drops to an eighth cup of carrier oil, but if you're using it on a very young child, say maybe under the age of 5, I would dilute it even further. I'd cut it by even half.
Okay. Are there any, this question comes from Elise, and she would like to know, are there any specific herbs you would suggest for balance, for instance, in vertigo treatment?
That is a question that is probably for a naturopathic physician, because you have to figure out why there's a vertigo or an imbalance issue before you know what to give to treat it.
Right. Yeah, that's great advice. You can definitely, you want to get to the source of whatever's causing it and then go from there.
Right.
Terry would like to know if you could go over how to plant garlic cloves again.
Okay, take your bulb, it's a big bulb, and divide it down into the individual cloves. They generally will come apart easily just in your hands, but if you have difficulty, you can use a fork. And then plant them pointy side up, about 6 inches apart. They like, at least from my purposes, they like full sun. And if you plant them, say, February, March, you'll be able to harvest them about August or September.
Perfect. Kelsey would like to know, you mentioned if stored properly, dry herbs can last for a year. How long can fresh herbs last?
That's dependent upon the herb. It depends upon the storage condition and upon the herb itself. Mm-hmm. So I can't give, any specifics.
Right. Samantha would like to know, I recently had an awful burn and used the gauze, and it actually worked great. It just made me curious if this was a normal material to use.
Yeah, gauze has been around for years, probably since they figured out how to weave cotton. So yeah, gauze is fine if you want to cover it. Just a level 1 burn, which is just a reddening of the skin, I usually won't even cover it at all. Stuff tends to heal faster if you let air get to it.
Interesting. Okay. Naomi has a question, and she would like to know, if clary sage should only be applied to the skin through a carrier oil, how about hydrosol? Can the clary sage hydrosol be sprayed on the skin? My sister is going through menopause and likes the hormone balancing properties of clary sage.
Yes, it can, as long as it's a hydrosol. I didn't go over hydrosols in my talks, but hydrosols are kind of like when you steam distill an essential oil, the hydrosol is the water that's left over from the steam distillation, and it still has some of the properties of the herbs in it. It's much, much milder than any essential oil or even an infusion is. So yeah, you can spray a hydrosol on the skin. That's fine, as long as it's not an essential oil.
Great. And Ramona has some kudos. She said, thank you for an incredibly informative and chock-filled webinar. I need to digest all that I've heard before I can formulate any questions. Thank you, Ms. Martin.
Oh, I'm blushing. Thank you.
And then Ariel also would like to know, what herbs are most sacred to Hecate?
I'm not a Hecate follower, so I can't speak to that.
Okay. Shannon is wondering, did you say you can do a rosemary tincture in white wine?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Cool.
Do it the same way you would with vodka or brandy. Just use white wine instead.
Interesting. I would like to know the results of that, Shannon.
It's very flavor, Renee. It tastes wonderful.
I bet. That's wonderful. Susan also wants to know, you mentioned herbs being a drug. Why is that?
There are chemicals in them. They're just naturally occurring chemicals instead of being synthesized in a laboratory. So herbs are drugs. As a matter of fact, the word drug comes from, I believe it's the Dutch word droog, D-R-O-O-G, which is I think it means either plant or herb. I can't remember exactly which one off the top of my head. But there are chemicals in herbs. So it makes them no different. It's just they're natural.
Right. A natural doesn't always mean benign. It doesn't always mean safe.
Yeah.
I think that's about all the time we have. We've hit about an hour now. So if anybody has any follow-up questions, you can certainly follow up with DJ at authordjmartin.com, and I'll spell that out. It's DJ at authordjmartin.com, and you can follow up with her with any questions. And I just want to thank everybody for joining us today on our webinar, and thank you so much, DJ, for such a wonderful and informative talk. I feel like I really learned a lot, and I feel like everybody really enjoyed themselves. So
thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And please make sure to say subscribe to the ACHS webinar email list. You can receive future announcements about our Master Lecture Series and other webinars. And just so you know, we have another webinar coming up on July 15th with the author of The Pantry Principle, Mira Desi, and she's going to talk about all the unsavory additives that are lurking in your food and how to make sure your pantry is in tip-top shape for holistic nutrition, so don't miss that. Also, if you don't know, we have 2 of DJ's books available at the Apothecary Shop. If you search her name in the search bar, you can find them. And we're very, very happy to support her as an ACHS graduate. So that's Apothecary Shop, APOTHECARY-shop, SHOPPE.com, and you can find them there. And also, if you enjoyed today's webinar, you will probably also enjoy the knowledge you'll gain in our accredited online course, Herb 101, Basics of Herbalism, which is the first step in herbal training and is ideal if you've just discovered herbs and want to know more. So it's a perfect class if you're just getting started with herbs. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thanks again, DJ, and have a wonderful day.